Someday. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Ooh, we got the Queen. Got a St. Louis M6 here. Got the King over there. And we got this, the 128 N52 powered on some R8s. Brian just did the stage 3 intake manifold. Basically, it's a manifold off of a 330 with disavows on it. So you get a little bit extra power out of it after you do the tune. But we're going to be putting on some manifolds. The headers that we're going to be putting on this E82 will be these AFE headers with the G-Sport high flow cats. So a little bit less noise, a lot less smell, and definitely more power. The legendary N52, you can weasel the headers in without taking the subframe off, but for demonstration and ease of install, plus doing the pan gasket, if you're watching this, your N52 probably needs a pan gasket. So just take the subframe off and do them both at the same time. Save yourself labor in the future. Tow hook installed. All right, engine support is installed. It's on there nice and tight. Try to avoid on some, especially like X5s, X3s, E92 335s, but they'll have the plastic fender deal here. And there'll be a big gap, so then when you put the support on there, you could risk cracking the fender on that side. This side, there wasn't any place solid, like right here, but there's not quite as big a gap, so this one is not gonna be quite under so much tension. All right, the engine brace is on. If you know you're gonna be doing this ahead of time, highly suggest as soon as you know to get in here and get all of the exhaust manifold studs and spray them with penetrating lube or WD-40, whatever your lube of choice is. When you go back together, you should have new hardware for it, but whether you have new hardware or not, you don't want to break the stud off in the head and have to drill it out and that whole can of worms, so lube them up, studs. With the brace installed, now we can raise it up and start getting to the subframe. Hopefully your car is like this one. It has all of the covers underneath. Very nice, especially if you're trying to conceal a leak. But it's pretty much just like any other BMW, all 8mm. There may be a 10 in there, but looks like on the little 128 here, it's all 8s. Main engine cover is off. So technically you don't have to remove the transmission cover here, whether you're doing the subframe or the oil pan gasket, both. But even though we have the engine brace up top, and you guys have probably seen it before, it's nice to have support right here, whether you're doing it on the ground and have a jack there, or in this case on a lift and use a screw jack. It's nice to have that second layer of support. So we'll take the transmission cover off too. Transmission cover off. All right, now we can see some things. So one thing to note is this is a rear wheel drive car, so no axles to deal with, no front diff to deal with. Pretty much the perfect BMW, kind of like that one or this one and these two guys over there. So yeah, we can get right to it. I'm gonna go up top and make sure that the steering wheel is straight and then put a seatbelt through it. It's a good practice when doing anything that involves disconnecting the steering shaft from the rack is getting the steering wheel where you want it to be, whether it be straight or off to the side, whatever is easiest to get to the steering shaft bolt. So you're gonna run the seatbelt through the steering wheel into the seatbelt latch there, just so it doesn't move when it's disconnected, because you don't want to be off by 180 or anywhere near that. And then you go to turn it to the left or to the right, you pop the clock spring inside, airbag lights on, customer's not happy, you're not happy. Just run the seatbelt through the steering wheel. So there we have tension on the wheel with the seatbelt. We have the wheel where we need it so we can access the steering shaft bolt. Down to the steering shaft we go. So looking right through here, there's the steering shaft bolt. You can access it through this hole right here in the subframe. It's an E10, so if you have a 1/4 inch E10, it fits right through. If you have a 3/8 E10, it does not fit through and you get a smaller E10. So going right through the hole in the subframe, we can see access to the steering shaft bolt. Nice. All right, before we disconnect the shaft from the rack, We're gonna put a mark on it just in case, so if things do go awry, we'll know where it was. Okay, so looking at the steering shaft right here in the rack, most BMWs have this black plastic piece here. See how it's got this little tab in the middle, and it lines up with the gap right here in the steering shaft. So in theory, as long as you don't move the rack, don't move the shaft, you could put the shaft back onto the rack right in here and not need alignment. Sometimes things move, sometimes that black piece is broken. So that's why we're doing the marking of the shaft and putting a seatbelt through it. All right, there we are, marking the shaft and the rack, just as a precaution. All right, now the steering shaft bolt is out and we have it marked. We need to get the shaft off the rack, so we're gonna lightly tap it with a pry bar. Don't hit the joint, like the little U-joint in the middle here. Try to get a good flat spot, like right there, for instance. Or you could even go up here. There's another one. So, light taps. Don't turn it into Swiss cheese, don't break the shaft, but light taps, and it should come right off. Nothing to it. You see how as the shaft was coming out, you had more and more flat spots to hit, so do that and it'll be good to go. If you're somebody that is really into preventative maintenance, now would be a good time for the water pump right here. And this little U hose, N52, N54, N55, they all have this U hose and electric water pump. If your valve cover is leaking, it takes out that hose. They make it in metal now, good upgrade. And while the subframe's out, it makes water pump and thermostat a lot easier to get to. All right, so at this point, now the steering shaft is disconnected, and we looked, this does not have active steering. If it did, there'd be a little arm connected to the control arm here, an electrical connector. We don't have that on either side. There's also nothing else really connecting the two as far as the subframe and the chassis goes. These power steering lines here, sometimes you have to disconnect them, sometimes you don't. It just kind of depends on the setup. If it's a E92 M3, you will want to take the power steering lines off their holders, but in this situation, we're going to move right to supporting the transmission just as a backup, because again, we do have the engine brace up top, but we don't drop a motor. So with the engine supported not once, but twice, we can start loosening up the subframe bolts. They're 18 millimeters, it'll be 3 on each side, so 1, 2, 3, and then it's a mirror image, so 1, 2, and 3. So to start, we're gonna break them loose, not take them all the way out, just so we get a little bit of gap evenly from side to side. See how it's dropping down, and then we'll disconnect the sway bar link from the sway bar right here on the bottom. All right, you can get a lot of the exhaust manifold nuts from the top. The ones you can't get from the top, you can get from the bottom. It's just a matter of having the right set of extensions and ratchets. Flex head ratchet is very beneficial. So he's using this little 1/4" ratchet, of course, with the adapter. Brian loves them adapters. And the 11 millimeter socket. So we can get as many as we can from up here, and then we'll raise it up, get the rest from the bottom. The key thing being, use the lube. So here's Brian's nuts. See how they all came out pretty easy? This one did not get any lube, and so the whole thing came out not looking too good. We are installing new hardware, but that's just an example. All right, so with all of the bolts out that you can get from the top, we're gonna get the rest from the bottom, but before we do that, we're gonna disconnect the O2 sensors. All right, so carefully disconnecting the O2 sensor harness from the back there. Carefully, there's some plastic hoses. And also getting the wires off of the bracket right there, just so they're 100% free and you can come out with the manifold. Okay, down below, we need to remove these bolts and nuts here. They're pretty rusty, will most likely break, but we'll put a little heat on them and see if we get lucky. Well, unfortunately, these bolts here did not want to cooperate, so yeah, this one broke. And then I about launched the socket into the M6 there. So after that, we got the impact. The 1/2-inch one just snapped them all. So yeah, no trying to hurt the M cars around here. Anywho, now we go back here. We're gonna use this E10 on one side, 13 on the other, break this bracket loose, then move down to there, lower that down. And the header should be coming out, somewhat movable. All right, now that we have these bolts out here for this bracket, before we just connect it from right there, take these O2 sensors out. It'd be better to have them disconnected. And they are the type that have a little tab there. Here's a little pick. Just put it right in there. Go to the other side. All right, so the bracket's undone. O2 sensors are unplugged. So now we can drop the exhaust a little bit. It'll only go down so far because of this bracket, but if we can at least just get it loose up there so we can kind of wiggle the manifolds around, that is the goal. Okay, so I reached up there and got upstream O2 sensor. Looks like this is the bank 2 manifold. Out. So anyway, you reach up there, grab bank 1, upstream O2 sensor, and the manifold for bank 1. There we go. So this is how they're sitting in the vehicle. We have bank 1, bank 2. We're obviously gonna have to swap these O2 sensors around. Depending on the engine setup and the manufacturer, you can put them back in the exact same spot. Sometimes you have to modify shields and brackets. This set looks like it's gonna be direct replacement. Boom, boom, boom. Right where they came out of the stock manifold is right where they're gonna go into the new manifolds. All right, now we're gonna remove the O2 sensors. Just using this 7/8 wrench. Sometimes they're pretty tight. You might have to put some heat on them, but yeah, these ones are pretty nice. So just do that. And then go put them in the manifold, the new manifold, in their respective position. All right, so the O2 sensors are installed on both manifolds here. We are replacing these exhaust gaskets. Let me grab a couple of the old ones. They're these round ones that go like this. Now you can see they get pretty chewed up pretty quick. This car is actually in really good condition overall. So when you get the new ones, you're trying to put them onto here, it's not gonna go that great. You're gonna be fighting it. It's most likely gonna break the gasket in half too. So what we do usually is take these gaskets and then we have a little bit of exhaust gasket maker, the copper, put it on there and then put it into the head. There's a little recessed spot in the head. So you put it in there and I don't know if you guys can see it. They go in, the gasket maker holds the gasket up in place while we take the manifolds and feed them up into position. All right, so we're gonna start with bank 1, should be the longer one. We'll get that one in first because that was the last one that came out. Then we're also gonna use the new hardware. You do wanna save yourself some time and struggle. If you're supporting the motor, and then take this mount out right there, you'll have a lot more room. You can see through there. But manifold's in. We're just gonna get on the studs now, so. All right, with bank 1 in, you can see it's much easier to get to bank 2. All the studs are easily accessible. So we put bank 2 on, and then we'll put the gaskets on and reconnect the exhaust right here. All right, back up top here. To get the manifold bolts on, it does help to remove the coolant recovery tank. Just a couple of tins here, it lifts up and moves over, and then you can get to all the bolts much easier. And then the nuts that go from the manifold onto the studs right there are 20 Newton meters, and then down where the manifolds collect to the rest of the exhaust, those are 45 Newton meters. But let's start it up, see how it sounds. So there you have it, guys. That's how you install the headers on a BMW N52 engine, specifically the 128 and the E82 platform here. It's not too bad a job. It's definitely possible to do this job in your driveway. May not be the most fun, but not having to lift, don't let that be a reason why you don't let your N52 breathe a little bit better. It's gonna be way better to do the headers on this guy in your driveway compared to doing this guy's headers. So hopefully this helps some of you guys out. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.